Alrighty, cool. We're back on a Monday for zZounds Live Gear Expo, and we're here with Jonathan Pines from Rupert Neve Designs, and we've got our gear cam from down in Texas, but Jonathan's up here in Illinois with us, so we're kind of, we're all over the place right now, so doing it digitally and hanging out. So how you doing, Jonathan?
I'm good. I'm very excited to be here and reaching out to our friends of zZounds on Facebook and talking to you about some of the great things we have coming out and audio in general.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and you guys have been busy despite, COVID and everything like that. So you guys got some really cool new equipment that's out or coming out soon, or it is out now.
It is out now.
There we go. So
that way we can talk about it.
Perfect.
It came out for the
awesome.
And today I'm going to do a really brief history of Neve and a couple of other things in a keynote deck, and then we're going to go dive hard into the gear. And I want to show everyone how what the feature set is on the gear and some talk about cool ways to use it. And I also want to just let everyone know that we're very open to questions. And if people want to ask us questions or submit things, please do. We'll get to as many as possible.
Should we switch over to the gear or the swag cam real quick to show what we're
I think that
giving away? Let's see. Yes. There we go. So you can get a bobblehead, or I did wear these. I'm sorry, but they're clean. Some Vader socks. And you can see Chris there with his Vader socks on. So if you ask some questions, feel free,
coasters.
And then you'll be entered into win some swag, and we'll send it out to you.
Yay.
Awesome. All right, Chris, we'll come back to you soon. Cool.
Okay.
So, go ahead, Jonathan. Feel free to...
I'm going to dive in and do a little bit of the history stuff here.
Awesome.
Let me get that up. And how's that? That showing well to you?
Alrighty. Yeah, we're rolling.
Okay. This is a brief history of Neve. Here we have some early hi-fi products and radio products that Rupert designed in the 40s to 50s. Then we're going to leap forward to 61, where he develops his first tube bass console, which you can see is a little bit rough from the open power supply on the left and the open sides. We got better at all this stuff. Then in 64, the first transistor console was developed for Philips, not modular at that point in time. And in 65 to 66, the first 12x4 console for Wessex, which literally had the first modular mic pre and EQs and sort of started the modern era or concept of modular consoles like this. Mm-hmm. This is all going on in Little Shelford, England, and that's Rupert in front of the Little Shelford Rectory that he purchased to house the Rupert Neve Company. In 1970, then Rupert had debuted the first of his large format consoles. This is a 28 by 24 by 4. Still, that's another picture of Wessex down there below. Mm-hmm. Wessex was a famous studio that's not there any longer, but lots of great records were made there. So from 65 to 75, he was in Little Shelford. He created all the famous Neve mic pre and EQ and the first dial bridge compressor, more about which later. Then in 2005, Rupert immigrated to the United States and founded Rupert Neve Designs in Wimberley, Texas. And here's some shots of, obviously, with Dave Grohl, Rupert with a lot of his gold there, being over-golded, Alan Parsons in front of his console, and that's Deadmau down below in front of his console.
Yeah, some super huge names in recording, music, and engineering in general there.
Yeah, and also great people making great music, which is what we really enjoy. Here's one of our friends, Kenneth Pooch Van Druten, who brings his 5059 and NBC out with Jay-Z, Justin Bieber, Travis Scott, and Iron Maiden, to name four of his famous clients. He's a first call guy and a really wonderful human being as well. Great sound mixer. Here's Chris Athens, another friend of ours who's actually Texas-based, who is Mr. Mastering for the hip hop community, among other things, and does a lot of other things, not just hip hop, but we just threw a bunch of that out. And he's an NBC 5060 centerpiece and MVP user. Then we have Toby Francis, who does Ariana Grande, Kanye, and Katy Perry. And he's got a full collection. You can see his 5060 and his 59 right next to him there with an MVP above it. And there's some shelf channels just to our right of that. This is Mike Dean. Dean is hip hop royalty. He does all kinds of stuff, not the least of which is Kanye stuff and just so many other people. So, wonderful, funny guy, super talented, and he has multiple 5060s and is also a big consumer of NBC. And you can see both of those in use right there. That was from, I think, a recent article in Variety. Another one of our friends, Andy Meyer, who's one of the best front of house guys on the planet, and also has, I think, one of the largest rigs on the planet. And you see 5060 up top there, and 5059s, Shelford channels, 500 series modules, on and on and on, Portico 2 channel, all over his rig. And that would make for a pretty large studio these days. And he actually takes all that out on the road. And that's one of the most amazing things about these guys is that they believe in analog summing so much that they will take a 5060 and a 5059 out and sum their digital consoles live. And believe you me, that's kind of a pain live. I mean, like, that's a lot of extra work, and they wouldn't go through it if they didn't really love the results from it. Here we have Nashville's Pete Lyman from Infrasonic Mastering, who, among other things, does Chris Stapleton, Brandon Carlisle, Jason Isabel, and all kinds of other things. And he was a big part of how the NBC got developed, and is a huge fan of it also, as you can see from his comments about it. We love Pete, and he's just a really honest, straightforward guy who does a fabulous job mastering and can do everything from country to skate punk to hip hop, and has done it all.
Nice. That's awesome.
Here's another Nashville friend, Neil Capolino, who does a lot of work with Alton Krauss, Dolly Parton, and Brad Paisley. And there's his his 5059, and you can't see it, but behind him, he's also got a 5052 and 5051 and 5024, a couple other things. And he's an engineer. He does a lot of work tracking vocals for people, mixing. He's got his own studio called the Doghouse in Nashville that he just sort of took over. He didn't found, but he took over his 100% ownership and has made it his own place. Actually in 2020 during COVID, brave man, and has been doing some great records down there. And then here we have a 5254, the dual diode bridge compressor that we're going to be showing on the gear cam and talking about in a few minutes. And this is a friend, John Mahoney, shown here where he was recently, up until very recently, artist in residence at Electric Ladyland. And here he is with the 5254, which he's a really, really big fan of as well. Now, let's dive into the gear cam, and we'll talk about some stuff.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so I'm going to exit that, and the first thing we're going to talk about today is the 5060, and I wanted to start this with talking about why summing. Like, why is summing important? What does it bring to a zZounds customer? Why would this be interesting to them? Why can't I just mix everything in the box? Because you can get a kind of tone and sound and saturation and vibe out of analog summing that you can't get in a box. People make millions of plugins to try and achieve the sound of tape and the sound of analog, and nothing is quite like the real thing. And why is that? The main reason is because most plugins are a relatively static snapshot of what's going on. Whereas in a summing console, everything that you're mixing, all the instruments you're pushing into it, how hard you're hitting it, how much you're pushing the low end, how much you're pushing the high end, how much you're using things like our saturation or texture effects, really, really defines how it sounds. And it's not static. It's very dynamic. It changes with the music. It changes with how you're using it, and really allows you to personally sculpt or personally change the sound to your desire. And to that end, on the 5060 here, we have 4 primary stereo channels, which are the faders there, 1 through 4 that you see. That's our stereo faders. Those all have switchable inserts and mutes, and I have an additional extra 10 dB of gain on each one. And that means that you can actually ride, key elements of your mix with this. And that's one of the very cool things about the Centerpiece is it puts you in right on your desktop or right in your studio, right in the center of your speakers. You're not reaching for stuff off to the side. You're listening to your mix as you're doing it, just like you would on a larger console. You're actually creating your mix. There are 8 stereos or additional 16 inputs, the little red knobs at the top, which are more in the fixed gain position typically. And this allows you to actually sum 24 by 2 with this. So in other words, you can take 24 inputs from your converters, bring them in analog, bring them in through outboard gear if you want, bring them straight in if you want, use the inserts on this. There's also a stereo master fader with an insert, a switchable insert as well. And of course, the big red knob. The big red knob means that we have monitoring. We have monitoring for 3 sets of speakers, additional stereo input sources. If you want to listen back to your DAW, to your mix, if you want to listen to Spotify to compare against some things, if you want to listen to a DVD, different source, do you want to have a live thing going through it as well. And the one of the cool things on the 5060 is, of course, that it has Silk Red and Silk Blue that are switchable on the master stereo output. And people always want to know, what is Silk? What is Silk Red and Silk Blue? It's a saturation or harmonic effect of saturating the output transformer to give you frequency dependent or frequency weighted harmonics that are really pleasurable and really exciting, and what we associate with vintage gear. People think always think about saturating the input of a console, but what really happens in a classic Neve console is you set up your gain correctly and then bump up a couple of 6 or 12 dB and hit the output transformer hard. And that's what really the classic saturation that we're used to, the vibe and tone and glue that you get from a console. And Silk Red and Silk Blue are ways to have a couple different flavors of that. So not only can you push the transformer and push the output, and that's one of the cool things on the 5059, 5060 is you can really set it up, then start flashing the peak LEDs and run 5 or 10 dB hotter into that. And it will just glue and glue and glue. It has so much headroom, it will not fold. It will just give you more of a holistic or mastered sound. Silk Red is generally more mid frequencies and some high frequencies. Silk Blue is generally weighted towards more low frequency harmonics, below approximately 400 hertz, and gives you a little bit bigger or noticeably bigger sound or heft to your mix or to your instruments. And it varies, you can vary it from not on at all to turning it on a little bit to turning it on a whole bunch, where it's really quite obvious and really adds a ton. And then again, as you push harder into the unit, the silk gets even more exaggerated. Other cool features on the 5060 include such things as we have a talkback. Who would ever want one of those? Hey, super handy. We have a great Class A headphone amp that we actually have outputted as the RNHP, which you guys have done really well with. We also have, and there's a headphone jack. And Tristan, our truck hand model, is doing a fabulous job of showing you these amazing things. We have a speaker dim and mute. Then we also have transport control with the Jock's shuttle wheel. And so what this allows you to do is bring your monitoring, your mixing, everything you need all together, your machine control all together right there in a handy package on the desktop. We're going to give Tristan a minute here to reset and go over to show the 59. And we're going to mute the gear cam briefly for this because it would get a little dizzying. But what we could do is also have Chris come back in with the swag cam for people who are still joining right now, and let us see what you could get if you are.
The swag cam. So it looks like James Burns here is asking, do you make a basic home studio for the average user? I know you guys tend to make some of the highest end studio gear out there. I think what James is maybe asking is there something that's more based or focused on a home studio user?
Yes, the next piece we're gonna show is a little bit more based on the home studio user, and then something to keep in mind. Something I always I've been a recording engineer producer for a really long time, and since the last century, and I've had the pleasure of working with a bunch of fun and interesting artists. And something I suggest to everyone, no matter where you are, if you're just starting out at home or you're a pro user, make sure that you get 2 good channels of everything. You want to get 2 good mic pre's, 2 good channels of compression, 2 good channels of EQ, good conversion. All of that are things you want to add to your arsenal. And not everyone can afford to do that all at once, but you can build pieces. And that's one of the nice things about things like either 500 series modules or the 5017, which is one of the more entry-level piece for us, which is a mic pre, a compressor built in, a direct box. Chris is doing a fabulous job on the swag.
So I hope you guys got a good idea of what you're able to get. Feel free to ask some questions. Jonathan here from Rupert Neve, not only do you work with Rupert Neve and have your job there, but you're also a professional engineer and have worked on numerous records. I know
this is not green screen. This is actual stuff.
That's real. It's like spot the Neve gear. But yeah, I mean, you've worked on some of you were saying you worked on American football because you're based in Champaign. A lot of the more Midwest kind of emo
Actually,
stuff.
technically, Brendan Gamble recorded that. I think I mastered that and then mastered the LP of their retrospective. I like to make sure that everyone gets the credit they deserve.
Oh, 100%.
But that was done here, and I've done, as you said, a bunch of other things in that realm.
So how did you get? Were you an engineer first using Rupert Neve Designs gear, and then got involved with Rupert Neve, or how did that process kind of work for you?
Yes, I was an engineer and producer first and foremost, and started out literally in high school, not doing a very good job, but doing a job, and learning my craft. And at that point in time, we were on tape and we were bouncing between 4-track tape machines. And trying to work our way up. And then I got together with an old and super dear friend of mine, Mark Rubel, and we started. Mark is head of the Blackbird Academy in Nashville now, and we started a hippie collective recording studio. Both of us right out of high school, where sort of everyone pulled their own gear. We got as much gear together as we could, and we tried to make records. And then I was able to kind of get a lucky break and start working in a bigger studio. And Mark kept building and growing his studio. And we were the 2 places in Champaign-Urbana to record, basically. We both got to often share records or playfully compete to who got to work on a record, all of that stuff. And so I came to Rupert Neve through the process of being a producer and engineer, and knowing how to make records, knowing gear, knowing all kinds of gear. I had been consulting for some other manufacturers prior to that, Alesis a little bit for sure, some stuff in Harman, things like that. And Josh, the general manager of Rupert Neve Designs, really wanted to get me involved and have some people that weren't based in Texas that could go and do some other things around the country. And the fact that I was also an active recording engineer and producer, I think was a real asset, because it allowed me to have conversations with many of our clients about how they actually work or how they could work, or different workflow ideas, and how they might integrate their gear. And I like to solve problems. So it's natural for me to talk to people about what they're doing, what might be a better or more interesting or an alternative way to get to that through that process.
That's awesome. So when you're developing a new piece of gear, do you basically use it on the projects you're working on, or do you kind of create new products with the gear in mind to kind of test, what it's capable of doing?
All of that. We start with a round table of discussion about what everyone like, and then we sort of redact it down to, what are the features that we think are most important, and we look in what shows up on everybody's list of the same things that everyone wants to see. And then we know that we're on the right path there for the feature set. And then Rupert and the engineering team tackles how to translate, a series of ideas that we might have into physical hardware.
Yeah.
And I think this process is not necessarily unique to our company. I think a lot of companies go through this, but we definitely try and involve all of our engineer producer friends and artist friends in this process to see, like, what would you like to see from us next, or what are some things that would be really cool. And we try not to do Me Too products. We try to do products that have some really unique feature sets and additional things. And because a number of us, Dennis, who's a head of production for Neve Designs, was a longtime touring front of house engineer in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And so he brings a bunch of experience with that as well. So we all know how, and I think virtually everybody in the company is a player of some sort. So we all try and bring that musical aspect to what we do with the company. And we think that's really important, that it's actual tools that do things you need, not that, we can make this feature. Right? It's more about, hey, you'll really use this feature, or you'll really want this feature. And listening is a big, big thing in this whole process. Rupert, the engineering team, spends hours listening to stuff.
Yeah,
Small component changes. And we'll listen for days in different types of music, loud and soft, different environments, to really decide on what is the most musical approach to what components go inside.
Yeah, I love that, because I mean, the technology could be there. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of an echo, but so you have the technology, but if no one's going to use it, what's the point of doing that? The fact that you're putting the gear in engineers' hands and being like, hey, what do you need? What do you want to see come from us? I feel like that's the most important part of really connecting with the community of engineers.
Well, anybody who makes music knows that the most important thing is the song, and communicating the song and getting the song across to people and making it emotive and reach you and make you feel something. If that's anger, if that's excitement, if that's love, if that's power, if that's sadness, all of those things are wonderful things that music can make you do. And we want our tools to be able to allow you to paint the picture that you want to paint. I mean, I look at, I often use an analogy to being a painter or to being an artist when I talk about being an engineer, because these are just colors that I'm using, or parts of the palette that I'm using. And that's why we want to make sure that Rupert Neve gear has a lot of flexibility. It's not just a one-trick activity. That's why we so value Silk Red and Silk Blue, and the fact that you can infinitely control the amount of it. Well, not infinitely, but you have variable control of the amount of it, so that you can paint in the way, or draw in the way that you want, that expresses what means to you inside. And I think that there are days that you, as an artist or a musician, want to work in black and white, and there's days you want to work in finger paints, and there are days you want to use alizarin crimson and phthalo blue, and there are days that you want to just primary colors, and all of that's great. And giving you a lot of flexibility to go from something that's extremely clean to super vibey, either super mid-range driven or super low-end driven, or all of those things, I think, is what we get excited about as a company, is that empowering our customers to be able to have a lot of choices.
Totally.
Because a lot of these cool things you see behind me are amazing one-trick ponies, and they do one thing really well, and they cost a ton of money. But to answer the guy who asked the question, one of the things we try and do is make our gear very flexible, so that as you're starting out, you can grow with that gear, and you can start as a beginner with that gear, and then as you become, as you get your Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours in, or whatever, as you go farther in your craft or in your pursuit of your passion, you can use our tools at any of these stages to help you.
Totally.
In that we try and make sure that our stuff also tries not to do too much harm. In that, one of the things that we love about the 5057, for example, is that it has a do no harm compressor. You really almost can't set it in a way that creates problems for it.
There you go. So just turn some knobs and really listen to it. And, I feel like that's kind of the personal touch that people put on their recordings.
And it really should be, because there aren't, so much great music has been born out of people using gear the wrong way as opposed to the right way, that I hesitate to tell people that this is how you're supposed to only do this. Well, a whole lot of the fun things in music come from kind of breaking out of those barriers and towards the edges.
I love that.
I think probably Kristen has the gear cam reset.
I was just going to say, let's go ahead and put that on here. I mean, just looking at your gear, I mean, just the design and the aesthetic of it is amazing. But you can kind of talk more about what it does. So,
okay, on the bottom there is the 5059, which is a more affordable summing mixer and offers a lot of cool features. Go ahead, you don't need as much. Focus on the gear for this.
Yep.
The 5059 has 16 inputs, all of which that have up to 10 dB of additional gain above zero. They also have a pan pot for every input, a switchable insert, and a selection to choose between mix bus 1 and mix bus 2. What does that mean? This is in fact a 16x4 mixer. So in other words, it actually has two distinct mix buses that you can use. You can cascade one and the other, or you can print both separately. You can print one that is very heavily affected by silk and driven really hard, or one that's maybe more pristine. So, example, if you want to crush some drums and bass, you can do that with one part of it, and want to have something a little bit more pure for, say, vocals and acoustic guitar, you can do that and not be stuck with one flavor again. There's some really cool things you can do with the 5060 also. It makes an amazing keyboard mixer, and a lot of studios use them for that because it has 16 inserts that have always-on outputs on those inserts. So you can send those actually to track individual things for keyboard, but listen to your whole keyboard stack at the same time. People do the same thing with drum submixing as well. And it's a 2-rack unit, very handy size. It is what we think is relatively affordable for someone who's at a midpoint in their career or starting out, and very, very flexible. Again, you can almost do no harm with this piece. The harder you push the outputs, the more it glues, and it really gives a wonderful sense of mixing through a large format console, which, to be perfectly honest, many people out there watching this won't be able to afford to do that, either own one themselves or even pay for the studio time. So being able to bring the large format technology home and make it available at a reasonable cost to the home user, I think is one of the great things about that piece. And as you saw so many, from some of those photos and things I was showing in the keynote earlier, a lot of people are using them live in the studio, all kinds of different situations. And it's been a very popular piece at zZounds, and we're thrilled to update it with the new shelf color. And that's brand new for NAMM. And we think it looks pretty sexy in that color.
I mean, I'm not an engineer, so if I had some of this gear, I wouldn't really know what to do with it, but I would stare at it for hours probably.
Turn the knobs up all the way.
Yep. And I think it's cool too, like you said. I mean, I'm seeing less and less huge consoles when I go into a studio, and people have their rack units. And you can, a lot of those are, you can transport them, you can bring them home, you can take them on the road. How many people would it take to move one of those big consoles? Probably a whole team of people.
Well, they depending on the size of them, they can weigh from a Yugo on up to a Sprinter van. They can get up to thousands of pounds, but most of them are in the 400 or 500 pound range. But again, not moving that at all. And honestly, they're expensive, and they're amazing tools for high-end working pros. And as you said, this allows a lot more people to access the wonderful sound of summing. And we think that summing should actively do something for you. It should bring something to the table. It shouldn't be just a super clean way to sum channels. Yes, we can do that. Yes, our gear will actually do that extremely well. But we think the texture and the ability to push the output transformers is really where the magic lies, and where some of that great analog vibe for music lies. And we think it's also a fabulous antidote for what people have described as a more colder sound of digital. And I think that becomes a very important way to bridge the gap. We've also noticed, kind of interestingly, that almost everyone who owns one of our consoles ends up buying a 5059 or 5060 to either take home or for their B room, so that when their main room is booked, they have access to that sound still.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that really made us feel excited and comfortable with the fact that we are able to bring that large format console sound down to a much more affordable and easy, as you said, easy to transport, easy to be more active with level. I think that's one of the great things, and I think that's a point about something that people haven't always made as well, because people talk about, well, I can just do this in the box. But you don't get the tone and the color and the sound, or even the separation and impact in the same way that you get with a summing mixer, which is why that so many working pros use summing mixers. Like, they may no longer be using a big console, but they're definitely using summing mixers. And that's why even those guys, just the fact that people like Toby and Andy will take a summing mixer to mix, Timberlake or, Ariana Grande or Katy Perry or someone like that. I mean, it's so much extra work to bring a 59 with you and have to set it up, as opposed to a digital console. But they're so adamant about what the sound of summing mixer brings to their experience, that they're willing to go through all of that. And I think that's very telling in a good way.
Definitely. And
I want to run through two more new products, but I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, you're okay. I was just going to comment, what people kind of... I'm sorry, let's see, I'll go back up to my mic here. I keep going back. Some of the quotes on this thing, it's just, when you read them, you're like, wow, that's the missing piece that, a recording didn't have, where I think there's a quote here that says, without the 5059 in the chain, the result is just not as present. Put the 5059 into the chain, and the width and depth is unbelievable. You just get that extra kind of bit there, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, and these are the things that you can't really model in the box, because when people talk about in the box versus actual gear, one of the analogies I like to use is, think of a still 35 millimeter photograph, and then think of 70 millimeter movie camera. Movie camera can see this side of your face, that side of your face, the top, all the depth that you have, because it's actually dynamic and changing. Whereas most sampling for modeling is taking a snapshot of one particular state of that particular piece of gear. And even if you take a couple of different ones and try and average them or provide options, it's not the same as the continually changing dynamic activity that you get when, for example, you're using a summing mixer. As you bring up one instrument, it changes the whole feel of the mix, because it's pushing the output differently. All of that stuff. As you add a little more silk in, or you bring up the bass and it's hitting the silk blue a little harder. All of that stuff makes for a very different experience than just mixing the box.
Definitely.
But we're not Luddites here at Rupert Neve Designs. We all understand that we need our digital world, and it's made it so much more possible for ZZounds customers to make music much more easily at home, under their time schedule, and particularly in 2020 and 2021 now. Going in the studio isn't an option for a lot of people, and getting together isn't an option. So having great stuff at home is really an important shift right now. And we've seen so many people try to up their game for their home studios, because they're no longer going into another studio. They have less access, or they're mailing their stuff in to be mixed at a studio, but they're not participating in the process as much because it's so hard to be in person. So one of the pieces we're really proud of that sort of ties into this is the master bus converter, which is the piece on top that came out in late 2020. We still consider it a new product because it's just starting to ship in quantity now. The idea behind that was really to make no compromise conversion, because everything that's created in the analog domain has to get into the digital domain somehow. And you can either do some harm while that's happening, do no harm, or even better, bring something extra to the table in the process. And that's one of the things that differentiates the master bus converter from really all other converters on the marketplace. Some other people have, sort of looked to some of the things we've done and copied some transformer or textual things. But what the master bus converter does allows you to go from incredibly clean, like as clean as possible, vanishing low distortion, 0.00 levels of distortion, to kicking in the transformers, and then beyond that, kicking in silk red and silk blue, and then going a step farther even beyond that and bringing in a limiter. Tristan is showing you how to adjust the texture control there, as well as swapping between turning on and off the silk red and silk blue, or choosing between it, and even engaging the transformer. All of which allows you control. It goes back to that whole thing about painting with color, having a palette, having a couple of different things. So, for example, if you have a master bus converter and you're tracking, in other words, you're recording, you might say run your kick and snare through that and really push it and use a lot of silk and really try and get some texture. Or if you're doing a guitar overdub or a vocal overdub, you might really want to bring a lot of color into it. But when you were getting ready, say, to mix, you might want to do it a little bit more pristine. Or if you haven't had a chance to add any color, you may need to add a whole bunch of color at that stage. So having that flexibility is really amazing. And the limiter that's in the master bus converter is very special. It's not like just the sort of peak limiter that you see stuck in some other people's products or other kind of things where it just is a little diode clipper and just shuts down some level. It really offers an amazing amount of control in terms of being able to increase the drive level and also the tonality of your mix. And it's very full featured, in that we're not really aware of anybody else who's ever really married these two kinds of things together like this. You have control over the release, you have control over the threshold, you have control how hard you push it. The red gain knob allows you to decide how hard you're pushing it into the actual converters themselves. And then you have a high pass filter, which is a lot of people don't really understand. They think, why do you have a high pass filter in a converter? Well, it's not actually taking your lows away. It's taking them out of the control path of the limiter itself. So in other words, you can have something limiting pretty heavily, but not limiting the kick drum. So in other words, it's just grabbing the snare, but it's leaving the kick drum alone. And that's an extremely powerful feature. Or you can set it so that it's, grabbing a lot of the dynamic elements of the mix and then missing some of the other ones. So it's not, for example, pumping with the kick drum each time. Or if you like that sound, which sometimes I kind of do, you can make pump a whole bunch with that. And again, it's another great way to sculpt it. So the high pass filter doesn't take anything out of the audio path, but it takes it out of the sidechain or control path of the limiter itself. So in other words, you can take out up to say 250 hertz, so that it's really not seeing anything in the way of low end, and it's just grabbing stuff in the mid range and high frequency zone. Or you can let it be more full featured or full frequency and get the entire mix. And it's just, again, another example of cool ways to choose how you're using it.
There's not just like one way to use it. Okay, put the knobs here and here and here and here. It's like each engineer is an artist in their own right, And
everyone at home will also deserve the chance to discover their own art and explore their own art and use things in ways that maybe an engineer would say, oh, that's not how I do it, but hey, that's really cool, and come up with cool things. So there's a lot of features on the front panel. You can choose different reference levels. There's a deeper dive on that, online in the manual. So if anybody wants to explore that stuff, there's word clock choices. On the back, there are a variety of digital outputs, AES, EBU, SPDIF, optical. All of these are different ways to interface with your DAW, basically. But it's an important point that I wanted to make, and I was alluding to earlier, that the master bus converter isn't just for mixing or mastering. It's for tracking. And again, as you're trying to upgrade your home studio and you have your interface that you got, which has, pretty good converters and pretty good mic pre's in it, but not amazing ones. One of the things you can do is get an amazing mic pre or an amazing converter to really up your game and give you a lot more choices there. Because you can use it. You can use the master bus converter throughout the whole process. You can use it from when you're tracking drums to when you're tracking overdubs to your vocals to when you actually mix the project. And particularly if you're mixing it through, for example, a summing mixer, then you've got all kinds of choices. You can use Silk Red on the summing mixer and Silk Blue on the MBC itself, and they're textured a little bit different. Because of the way the master bus converter works, they sound a little different in that unit, and have a lot of control about the way you make your mix sound. And one of the nice things about that limiter also is it makes for a much more finished sounding product. Yep. I do a lot of mastering for a lot of people around the country. I'm fortunate to be able to do that. I'm fortunate to be supported that way. It's one of the few things I can do with my busy career with Rupert Neve Designs that I can do on nights and weekends. I don't get to track as much, so it's mostly mixing and mastering that I get to do.
Yeah.
And everybody always struggles for how to get their sound to be more finished. And using great gear is one of the ways that makes it a lot easier. And things like a limiter where you can make your whole mix 3-4 dB louder, and then adding some texture to make it bigger and thicker, really make a really large difference for the consumer. These are all things that you can really hear. They're not like super subtle things like, well, I think that's different. It's like, wow, I actually hear that right away.
There it is. Yep. Yeah. And I love bringing technology and creativity together to see what people do with it. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and it's they're tools. They should be used and abused. They should be well loved. Should try them out doing a lot of things. The things we suggest you should do, and then a whole bunch of stuff that we haven't suggested, because that's where a lot of the fun lies. I mean, the whole, this is an old story, but the whole thing about the Phil Collins drum sound and gated drums, that whole thing was a mistake. And making a mistake a feature is a big thing. I used to years ago got to work with an artist named Adrian Ballou, and he was always about featuring a mistake. I recorded guitars for a song. Here's a Big Electric Cat, and there were punched in 3 different tracks to make this comp of them all. And there were these fretless, weird, super distorted Foxtone guitars, and I made a mistake in one of them. And I was like, and I played, he'd gone off to take a break, to get out of the control room and take a break from the process. And I played it for him. I said, well, yeah, I'm going to fix, that thing where the punch-in's a little bit odd there. He goes, no, I love it. And that awesome. That stuck with me for a long time. That mistakes can also be wonderful. The next piece of gear I would like to show on the gear cam. Actually, let's take 1 second. Let's go back to the swag cam, because again, people who've joined in, let's see if you ask questions or make comments. There are some amazing swag things we've got.
I mean, how do you not want that on your console desk?
Well,
while you're wearing your fader socks too. So just a reminder too.
And using your coasters.
In coasters. I don't have a coaster right now. I'll have to ask you more questions and then hopefully win some prizes.
If you would only comment, maybe maybe there's a chance that some coasters would come your way.
Totally. Perfect.
And then Chris has a great joke on the back, which is just, as anybody who's ever been in a studio knows, that when you go to put your drink on the console, the engineer, the studio owner, the assistant all have a heart attack. Maybe not the engineer, but the studio owner and the assistant all have a heart attack. So Chris has devised a way for you to put your drink on the console, which I think is just super fun.
Perfect.
Let's go through the other new piece that we have, which is the Rupert Neve Designs dual dial bridge compressor. The gear cam is coming back, I think. There it is.
There we go.
So the dual dial bridge compressor, which is the middle piece there, features two of the diode bridge compressors that Rupert developed for the Shelford channel. Now, these are not just a clone of the diode bridge compressors that he invented in the early mid 70s. This is a really different thing. He's able to get these to be much more flexible in terms of the attack and release times. The original dual diode bridge compressor, the original diode bridge compressor had attack time of about 100 milliseconds, and that was about as fast as release time. Well, that's relatively slow in the modern age. This will go under 1 millisecond, literally to about 700 microseconds for attack times, which is way faster and allows you to do way more creative effects with compression, which is what people like to do these days. Mm-hmm. At the same time, the dual diode bridge compressor is 20 dB quieter than the ones from the past. So it sort of ticks all boxes of what we're trying to achieve. It has the vibe and tone of classic pieces. It's a lot more quiet, a lot more flexible. It's a lot more easier to use, a lot more control brought to the user. Mm-hmm. And people always want to know, why a diode bridge compressor. I mean, there are different kinds of compressors. There's a VCA compressor, there's FET compressors, there's optical compressors. One of the ones that people understand least are diode bridge compressors. Mm-hmm. And it's actually using a diode and how the electrical control signal affects the diode to control the gain, or mu in this case, of the actual compression that's occurring. But what's really cool about a diode bridge compressor is that with no compression going on at all, as you push level into it, it starts kicking out low frequency harmonics, specifically under about 400 hertz. It starts kicking out pretty intense amounts of low frequency harmonics. So before you even start the compression, it's getting bigger and more intense sounding. And then when you kick the compression in, it starts to take that up to another level entirely. Dual diode bridge compressor feature-wise has all classic things that you would expect. It has a threshold control. Mm-hmm. It has gain makeup. I don't know if Tristan's going to demonstrate any of these or point towards any of these things. That's the gain, the threshold control. It has a multi-switch, a 6-switch switch for attack and release that has both straightforward and complex attack and release times. There's a switch next to it called fast that allows you to practically double all the attack and release times, thereby effectively giving you 12 different combinations there. Of course, there is a parallel compression control built in, and that's an extremely powerful feature of this, in that allows you to maybe compress something too much, bring back a little bit of the original signal, so you get that really great blend of intense amount of compression with some of the original dynamics of the particular unit. The other thing that I think when you're thinking about a diode bridge compressor that everyone has to keep in mind, this is not for the faint of heart. This is not meant to be pristine. The master bus processor, the MBP, can go very clean and very subtle amounts. The dual diode bridge compressor is meant to have an attitude from day one. It's meant to bring something to the party, and that's going to be tone and color and vibe. And it's very apparent that way, and that's a very important feature of it. And that's also why it's important that parallel compression is built in, because you can then bring back a little bit dynamic. So it's a great piece for many things. It's a great tracking piece. Diode bridge compressors are really classic for kick and snare. Mm-hmm. Bass guitar, they were designed for bass guitar, just the way they make it bigger and just more right off the bat. Yeah. And they're very easy and quick to use that way, because they just start doing their thing, and it's like, oh, this just sounds right off the bat. It's also a classic thing for electric guitar buses. So many records have been mixed with diode bridge compression on electric guitars. A lot of people time on vocal, sometimes even on acoustic guitars, and it's you'll see those kinds of things in like Led Zeppelin acoustic guitars, for example. Stuff like that. The other cool thing, though, is not only can you use it for tracking, but again, you can use it for your mix down. You can put it across either a bus when you're mixing and stomp the drums really heavily that way, or stomp bass or electric guitars or whatever, or put it across your whole mix to give you that nice boost of energy and to excite your mix and really make it a little bit more in your face, or a lot more in your face, depending on what you want to do. And again, that sort of goes back to that whole thing I was talking about we try and make pieces of gear that you can use throughout the whole process, that you can bring something to the table for everything that you do, not just, this is just tracking, or you can only use this when you're mixing or mastering. You can use this for everything you record. And I think that's a really, really, really important point. I'm sure that you've got some comments and questions, or hopefully.
Let's see, segue over to this comment. Would that comp be useful in a mastering chain?
Yes, as a matter of fact, John Lonnie really, that's what he was really wanting it for, was for mixing and mastering. And it is, hence the parallel compression built in. So you can either use it by just kissing a little bit and bringing it up. And, the Rupert 70's Designs dual diode compressor was used on a lot of mastering, like literally tons of records. And this just gives you more flexibility, more variability, more affordability, actually, and a lot more compact, easy to use environment. So yes, I think it is actually a very legitimate mastering tool.
Awesome. So yeah, I mean, you guys have been ultra busy. I mean, these are great tools. Awesome. I like how you kind of think about gear as, a palette, or colors, for a painter, artist like that. So it's like you guys are just coming out with more colors and more ways to allow engineers to really sculpt their sound and really kind of make it their own, while also getting that, like, there's like an undefined thing that happens when you hear a piece of music that just has that sound to it that's just right. And I think Rupert Neve gear, I mean, you run anything through, some of your gear, and you'll get that sound, and you'll get that professional quality, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, and just to amplify what we're saying, I think that the giving everyone at home a chance to both have really good tools, but also tools they can use all throughout their process, not just one. I can only, this is just good for this one thing, but having tools that you can use throughout the entire process of making music, I think, is really, really important, because, our stuff does cost money, and people want to know that they're going to get real value and use out of it the entire time and throughout everything that they're doing. And I think that that's something that I feel very proud about, what Rupert and the engineering team have come up with in so many of these products, is a lot of variable use for everything, and not boxing you into one kind of sound.
Totally.
Giving you genuine choices.
I feel like I've learned so much just from talking to you, within this hour. So, I mean, you're full of knowledge when it comes to Rupert Neve Designs gear. So, anyone watching, if you do have questions, even after this live stream, feel free to comment your questions. These are the experts. So, if you need answers, they'll provide them for sure. So, was there anything else you wanted to show off, Jonathan?
No, I think that's, we like to keep a good chunk of things going just right now. These are newer products, and people have a lot of questions about them. But to your point, if you're like me, I always think of the question I wanted to ask, after that person's walked out of the room, or after I've left the booth, or, after I'm somewhere else. But feel free to send them on in to zZounds, and I'll even if it's a couple weeks later, email them on in, and they'll send them on to me, and I will answer any of your questions about this. Or if you have questions about just the process of recording or making music, feel free to kind of ask me anything. I'm always game to help Sounds customers make better music and make better recordings.
Awesome. I love that. Well, let's switch on the swag cam one more time. Let's see. Is Chris ready? So, anyone that's asking questions here, you could win this, and you could have this bobblehead. I mean, I want that bobblehead. You guys need to send me one. So
there might be more
I'll give
than
you
one.
my address.
There might be more than one too. So that's what I'm saying. You want to get in there and get in the process of asking questions and interacting with the zZounds team.
Totally, we love it. And I mean, I love the socks. I just need to find my other one. I searched for like an hour. I only have the right one or left one. I don't think they're labeled. But Hey, it was a pleasure talking to you. I mean, the gear is incredible, and you've provided so much insight and knowledge on this stuff. So, really appreciate it, Jonathan. And yeah,
It's
you're
been a
you're
lot
in
of fun.
Illinois too, so we
Yep,
got a snowstorm coming.
we're both Illinois boys, so yeah, it's snow and ice. I think is coming. Looking outside, I really enjoyed talking with you, John, and thank you so much for the opportunity to tell a little bit more about Rupert Neve Designs to everyone at zZounds. And we look forward to doing this again with some different products
Awesome.
and new ideas.
Awesome. Well, have a great rest of your day, and everybody out there, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Bye.